And welcome in. I'm Stan the Fan Charles, along with Terry Hasseltine, and we are part of Drawing a Crowd, the business sports tourism podcast presented by the Maryland Sports Commission and Pressbox Sports. Terry, how are you?
I'm doing outstanding, Stan. Appreciate having me on again.
Wanted to touch base on something that I wanted to dig into something that we touched base on a month ago, and that is the Youth and Amateur Sports Grant and the Erin Busch Fund. Tell us a little bit again to repeat and dig deeper into it, what the purpose of that fund is.
Well, ultimately, at the end of the day, the purpose of the fund is to make us competitive with our competition across the country. Going into the youth and amateur sports market, most people think it's a bunch of kids playing on fields or on courts and the like. But across the United States and other parts of the world,
it's big business.
It's huge business.
Yeah.
As I alluded to in our last conversation, in 2019, youth and amateur sports across the country did $19.8 billion in travel economic impact in the United States. The NFL did 16.3. So obviously we're competing across the country for all these youth tournaments, in the sports of soccer, lacrosse, hockey, basketball, Quidditch, which is now called quad ball, cricket, you name a sport out there. We're competing against, competitors in Florida, Texas, California, and the like. And so we went to the legislature, several years back, and we knew that we needed to create some type of competition war chest for youth and amateur sports. And we got full support of our efforts through the legislature. It was actually passed unanimously. Then there was one caveat to creating it, is the fact that we had just lost our Speaker of the House in Aaron Busch, who was a huge champion of what we were doing.
He had passed away.
He had just passed away. And so Maggie McIntosh, who at that time was the chair of appropriation, said to us, would you mind, showing some, honorary respect to the program because of Mike's love for youth and amateur sports and the things that he'd done around state. And our hand was automatically yes. I mean, we would love that, but we didn't want to take that assumption. And so when Delegate McIntosh brought it to our attention, obviously we had to put the name in there, and then the funds were passed unanimously through legislator, and here we are, in our going on our fourth year with the program, handing out about $1 million a year to our partners across the state.
And what does that $1 million a year, what does that allow you to accomplish that you might not be able to accomplish, or you would be strained to the max?
Well, it allows the event owners that we're doing business with to know that they have a partner in providing some base money for their event in Maryland, so that they can turn their attention about drawing more people to their events and creating more exposure around their events, and the like. So it gave us a chance to compete against our surrounding states to draw events from there, but also compete on a national level where people are like, I can go to this location, and if I go to this location, they're going to give me free fields, they're going to give me this, and they're going to give me that. Well, anybody knows across the country, once you get into the mid-Atlantic to the Northeast, that trade out for a facility for tax revenues is a little different. So the fund allows us to negate some of that competitive advantage that places down in the Southeast and the Southwest and out West we're starting to get traction against us. And then it allowed us to compete not only for those pieces of business, but it also helped build our reputation nationally as a place that can do and can get things done at a very high level.
Are these pieces of business, are they more of the youth sports specific? In other words, the lacrosse and the field hockey and those sorts of events, not the bicycling classic or the 5-star?
Totally different set of funding mechanisms there. This is really on the youth and amateur. This is anybody who is not getting paid to perform. So it is, like I said, youth soccer, youth lacrosse, cricket, Quidditch, running events, and the things where it's bringing lots of teams and lots of folks together to put heads in beds, food in belly, gas in cars, credit card and cash encounters, and butts in seats to ensure that the tax
I love the
economy,
way you say that.
the tax economy for the state of Maryland is being raised by visitors. And so what it does on the local front is it keeps our tax base low so that the fields and the facilities that we have out there, our user costs don't go up.
The youth sports, just how competitive is that out there that other areas like the Southeast would like to steal a lax splash or something like that?
So when I got into this industry about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago on the sport tourism side, there was only a handful of sports commissions across the country. Now there's over 650 destinations across the country who have dedicated resources, identity, and exposure opportunities to grow their sport tourism portfolio around youth and amateur sports. So what was me going to bat over a couple dozen eggs,
Yeah.
now I'm going to bat over a few hundred sets of eggs out there to compete for events that bring positive opportunities to the state through publicity and the like, bring positive tax revenues to the state from the visitation, but also creates a quality of life because we're keeping the tournament in our backyard, means that local participation is also equated into the opportunity event. So teams that can't afford to travel, teams that can't get out into those travel market events have a chance because we brought something into market for them to compete on a local level against national competition.
Now, when you said there's 650, entities out there, how many are state entities like the Maryland Sports Commission?
So we've been going back and forth on this. So there's really just two or three of us that are really anchored,
Okay.
from the state perspective that have the ability to host, support, and provide grant resources. Now on those other entities, basically about 40 plus states across the country have created some type of marketing and or execution opportunity, but they're part of another division or they're embedded in some other aspects. So they're not just specific to sport. They might hold, for example, the sports market and then the small business reunion or something else market inside their organization. And a lot of the things in the quote unquote sports commission space, they're usually local jurisdictionally equated. So there's usually inside a county and or a city where we're at the state level, what makes our entire state our inventory and our playground in which to recruit these activities.
When this first started, these events like Lax Splasher, was tourism really the thought behind them at all times, or is that something that has grown since you've been in charge of things like this in the state? Were they always seen as tourism advantages?
Yes and no. And the reason I answer it that way is that it's always had a place in the tourism market, but it was always seen as kids playing games on field. So it kind of went into the park and rec and and the like. But then as we saw during certain situations like 9/11, the downturn in the economy in 08, 09, and then the pandemic, the first thing to recover out of all of those things is usually the sports aspect of the tourism market. And therefore, each one of those set a different trajectory and growth in the sports tourism space. After 9/11, after hearing the president name 7 out of the 10 things that needed to get us back to normalcy, there's an attention brought to it again. And then we went through a little bit of time, and then we had the downturn and the recession in 08, 09, which is right about the transition of when this office was created for the state of Maryland. When we came out of that, down period, you saw an escalation in sports tourism again. People started to understand, okay, getting kids back on the field to play healthy lifestyles, that type of thing is a very important thing, and also a very thing to drive, economic return and vitality by bringing visitors to the market with sports as the anchor tenant. And then coming out of COVID, in 2019 was the peak year of sports tourism in the United States, going back to that stat of $19.8 billion versus the NFL at 16.3, and then all the other professional leagues below that. And then coming out of the COVID, we met the 19 numbers within 10 months after COVID, and now we are growing at about 3.5 to 4% annually since COVID, which has only been a year or two, but you're seeing a bigger attention again because it was the quick to recover. The fact that moms and dads were willing to take Johnny, Sarah, whoever the namesake is, to participate in something that is, important to growth strategies, team camaraderie, building a chance of bettering themselves and the like, and a healthy lifestyle.
The grant and fund allows the Maryland Sports Commission to be more responsive, effective, and efficient within the sports tourism world. How does it do that?
Well, at the end of the day, if a rights holder, someone who owns the event, or a national governing body or the like, knocks on our door, we have the ability, because we have a grant program now, to assess and evaluate their thing and move at the speed of sport. And it doesn't leave us in a position to have to go try to figure out where those dollars would come from. We can then go right into the fund and say, because of your budget and because of the way it's developed, if I'll just use an example. If it's $100,000 budget, we'll just use that as an example. Well, we know that we can use up to $30,000 within that budget in the grant program because we will only go up to 30% of the total budget of an event. But it allows us to know right from the get-go what we can contribute and what we can be a part of in order to make sure that quality piece of business stays in Maryland.
And is successful for the promoter as well.
Exactly.
It sounds like this has helped you be competitive in keeping business. Does it help when you go out? How much are you actively seeking new events that might be taking place somewhere else? To use an example, the CIAA, which was in Richmond for years. This is different. But how much are you out there competing for new events?
365 days a year, in all fairness, because there's new opportunities that present themselves, sometimes unannounced, sometimes things that we've been reviewing and evaluating with one of our Team Maryland partners across the state that they've been wanting to put in their portfolio, but they just needed the right time in which to bring it into market. We attend various trade shows throughout the year, and the reason we attend those trade shows, especially the ones that we attend, is it's a way for us to bring our Team Maryland partners together as a collective whole to sell and promote the state of Maryland as a sports tourism destination. But it's also a location in which the highest representation of event owners and rights holders are out there. So we're about to go to a major conference here in April called Sports ETA, which used to be the National Association of Sports Commission. And there'll be about 1,200 folks there, those 600 and plus CVBs, sports commissions, and tourism entities, and another 400 plus probably rights holders and event owners, in a 3-day educational-based platform, mentorship-based platform, driven economy, but a chance to do business in a very open space to talk about why Maryland differentiates itself against a place like Kentucky, like Tennessee, like Florida, Georgia, etc. And it's our chance to set the initial talking points, and it's the place for us to put a face with a name so that when we get on the phone and we get on those Zooms, we now are talking apples to apples, and we're not having to re-educate ourselves and try to get up to speed.
You've worked, as I've pointed out, we've talked about it before. You're in your third governor. Two were Democrats, Martin O'Malley and Wes Moore. Second was Governor Hogan, a Republican. Have the governor's office been behind you tenfold since day one?
Out of all the three that you mentioned, they've all been there. They see the value of what we do, the good works that we're doing through the Maryland Sports Commission, this fact that they see that we collaborate across, all platforms and all mediums. The fact that we look at events that are unique and obscure. We're hosting a huge event in kickball here in the near called Turf Wars, and it's an event that belongs to the LGBTQ plus community. And so we also connected with growth of strategies in the HBCU community between our apprenticeship program Propel and also the creation of NCL, as well as supporting Baltimore and going after the CIAA. So we are in the queue on multiple, whether it's demographic, whether it's gender, whether it's who you choose to love. All those things fall within our purview. And at the end of the day, as long as we're doing good work on behalf of the state of Maryland and our Team Maryland partners, we're always going to be in a good spot, I think, with our leadership across the state, no matter who's in the office.
So you're the Maryland Sports Commission, but underneath that, you have a team called Team Maryland. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about how they factor in all of that goes on?
Yeah, obviously, an office of my size, 3 people, plus a PIO that also works within the Stadium Authority. For us to be across the entire state, we need partnerships. And so we created a collaboration initiative called Team Maryland, which is the destination marketing organizations within the counties across the state. And we gather them together monthly to talk about trends that are happening in the industry, what's on their bucket list, their hot plate, and things they want to pursue. And then we figure out strategies, collectively about how we're going to pursue certain opportunities. And it's created us a network. That means if I need to pick up the phone in Ocean City, I got the point person there that's going to give me some of the background on what they're doing and why they want to do it.
You don't have to start at square one.
And I don't have to start at square one. And the other thing, too, it allows us to understand how we can disseminate and disperse the grant pool in a very productive way to support existing events. because it's important to support existing events, but also what's going to be net new in the portfolio and how do we go about that. So it's called Team Maryland, for example. Together, everyone achieves more is basically the principle.
Is it basically, though, the same as a business might have a board of directors? That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
That's what their purpose is. So you get smart business leaders from around the state that participate as Team Maryland.
100%. That's about it. Team Maryland is our board of directors. They're the ones that keep us grounded. They're the ones that help us identify if something is value or important to their market. And the really cool thing that we've done with our grant program is that rights holders can apply to the grant, but it has to have a sign-off from a Team Maryland partner. So there's an awareness. Before we had the grant program, there were some events that landed in market, and you just sometimes ask yourself, how did this land here? No one knew about it.
Right.
Even the destination had because it was a local, club or an organization bringing it to fruition. So our job through the grant program, our job through Team Maryland is start connecting the dots to make sure that when something lands here that's valuable for the state of Maryland and or that specific county or for that specific sport, there's a collective knowledge base that we're sharing in resources, information and identity and make sure that the state of Maryland is at the forefront of people's decision-making prowess.
So they help by asking the tough questions. Your Team Maryland partners, they ask you tough questions and might create knowledge you otherwise wouldn't have?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, the politics in various jurisdictions are different than the state politics and some of the things that even go on in sports. There's a lot of politics in the sports community, everything from the, professional leagues all the way down to the grassroots level. And what is good for the youth soccer community on the Eastern Shore might not be the same, identity that's happening in the central part of the state or down south or out west. So having them on the ground, giving us the pulse of what we might be walking into when we help them support an activity is very important because we don't want to step on any landmines that could trigger a conversation that is either negative or it's going to defeat the purpose of why we're intended to be collaborating on this stuff. So having these coaches or having these mentors in the market allows Maryland sports to interconnect relationships across the entire state.
Do they have any authority over you where they can say this is really a bad idea, or you generally understand what their objections are and might decide they're right, this isn't for us?
Well, at the end of the day, if they're not behind it and they don't support the activity in their marketplace, we're not here to force feed and or to, slam anything down anybody's throat. Our job is let's, cooperate and let's collaborate. And if it makes sense, we'll pursue.
Yeah.
If it doesn't make sense, we'll back off. And if we have to be the big in the room, to the rights holder and say, hey, it's not right at this time, but let's not forget the relationship because you never know who your future employer is going to be or who your future business partner is going to be. So how we enter business is just as important to how we exit business. It all, works in a very, symbiotic way because as I alluded to, it might not be right for us today, but it could be right for us 5 years from now, depending on facilities, depending on who the partnership and who the relationships are with.
I don't want to step on a future topic that we might have, but events like the Cycling Classic and the 5-Star, do they have the equivalent to the grant, the sports and grant program? Mm-hmm. In other words, is there some funding mechanism that allows you to have seed money that the people that might come in here and spend a lot of money know that you're really partners with them?
Yeah. Now flipping the script from youth and amateur to high-profile major events, as we like to call them. We created, through House Bill 897, a $10 million replenishable fund year after year based on what's used in the previous year to support high-profile, high-attendance, and high market/broadcast opportunity events, i.e. like the Maryland Cycling Classic and the Maryland 5-Star, but also supporting the future of the BMW Championships coming back, to the greater Baltimore region, supporting efforts around big-time soccer matches coming back into the market, as you've seen some announcements here recently, and supporting things like maybe NCAA lacrosse bids and those things that are marquee that the general public might be aware of do require sometimes putting in some seed money in order, to bring those things to fruition because we are competing against venues outside the state.
And they can be substantial amounts of money, that seed money, like the money for the, I guess you'd call it the landscaping or the reshaping of Fair Hills out there.
Now, that obviously was done through a different effort, but, throughout the year, part of our responsibility when we pursue and we host and we own some of these events, there are things that we have to keep up to the standard of the national, and in this case, the international federation. So when we have to make changes and modifications, we have to sometimes be able to tap into resources in order to get that done. Like every year during the 5-star, the cross-country course has to be adjusted just enough to differentiate from the previous year and also meet the new standards that might be in height jumps, the height of a jump, or what they can land on, etc. So we always have to be able to adjust to that based on what the new standards might be. Same thing with cycling. Same thing in the international soccer space. Teams are, if you watch soccer, sometimes you're like, why is this team really well recognized this year, but the following year they might have been relegated down in posture. So we're having to follow the politics, the economics of it, and the like. But we have to have the ability to contribute, to have a seat at the table to ensure that we capture the net positive for the state of Maryland.
To sort of come back to the beginning, though, the Maryland Sports Youth and Amateur Sports Grant and the Michael Erin Busch Fund, how many events have they allowed you to bring to the state?
So over the 3 years of the fund so far, we have given out $3 million in grant dollars, and it's impacted our state in $175 million in direct spending on our economy. That was your personal
That's
check account.
a pretty good return on $3 million.
A tremendous return. It's allowed us to retain, and it's allowed us to bring additional events into the marketplace just in the last 3 years alone. We think the future is very bright with the program, and I believe if we continue at the pace that we're going, we are creating a model in the state of Maryland that others across the country want to emulate.
I appreciate your coming in again for the second edition of Drawing a Crowd, the Business of Sports Tourism podcast presented by the Maryland Sports Commission and Pressbox Sports. I thank Terry Hasseltine. I'm Stan the Fan Charles. I hope you'll keep listening and watching these podcasts.